Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
I'm Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're blessed to always be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. And for episode 125, we bring back our guy, friend of the it's so cool to be able to call this man a friend of the Pistons Pulse podcast. He is from the Front Office Show podcast, which, guys, if you're not watching, you should be watching, especially on Fridays when him and Trevor Lane go live. He contributes over at Spotrac and the Basketball Bulletin Substack. It's our guy, Keith Smith. Keith, what's up?
Hey, man, I appreciate all that, but it just tells me you need better friends. I don't know, man. I'm not sure, but yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's always fun to join you guys.
How's the post-Celtics high right now?
It's okay, right? I woke up happy this morning. I'm in a good mood. I'm extremely excited, but now it's like 9 days.
Yeah.
Can't get too excited now. I'll end up peaking like a week out from the finals if I go too over the top. So I am both subsequently sad that we lost so many games because so many of these short series, but I am also very happy because I have an incredible amount of writing to do about the offseason. So now I at least I can't even make the excuse at night of, well, I got to watch a game instead. Yeah. So I just have to pull myself away from Marvel movies and bad TV and other stuff to actually get the writing done that I need to.
Below Deck, right, Keith? That's
Below Deck, man. That's my show. That is the trash show of choice here in the Smith household. But we're going to try to delay that until we get into the middle of July and the off season slows down. But for now, it'll be writing and then focusing on catching up on the draft guys that I haven't had a chance to really get into yet.
Do you think that the NBA, let's say the Mavs win tonight, we're recording this on Tuesday, and sweep, do you think they lose any momentum through the playoffs with that? Or you think they'll find enough storylines between the Mavs and Celtics that, it'll cover these 7, 8, 9 days?
Yeah, I still be okay in general. I think people are very, in tune to looking for the NBA finals in June, right? And it's talked about that all the time, right? You want to be playing in June. So I think people are very ready for that part of it. What it's going to get tough is I think we're going to start to see some maybe off-season stuff that was planned to come out a little later. We'll probably get pulled up. We'll probably start getting into some rumory stuff and some things like that. And then I think we'll also get into a lot of deep dives on this potential finals series that people are going to eventually be like, all right, come on, we're down to the Nehemiah Skata versus Dwight Powell breakdown. Like we're probably okay here on finals coverage, but it'll be a lot of fun. I think the people who do it right and do it seriously, they're going to have a chance to really sink their teeth into this one in a way you don't usually get to, because a lot of times it's all right, series ended, there's a day or two and we're right into the next one. So at least this time around we'll have a little bit of time to digest and figure it all out and do the analysis.
Omari, we had some Pistons news so since the last time we recorded, so I'll let you talk about that a little bit, and then obviously we'll get Keith's thoughts.
Yeah, no doubt. Obviously the big news of the past week was Trajan Langdon's being hired as the Pistons' new head of basketball operations or president of basketball operations. It hasn't been officially announced, so I'm not sure which wordage they're going to finalize with it, but that's the deal right now, and not sure exactly when it's going to become official. I would assume within the next day and a half or so. I saw he already put Pistons basketball ops on his Twitter profile, so there's got to be some amount of ink dried on it at this point. I know a lot of people don't know how to feel about it just because he's not somebody who's been in like a leading role, and he doesn't. But I've asked over the weekend today, and the feedback has all been he's really smart. He's a great communicator, very much a people-oriented person. And, obviously those are some of the traits you want, in a president. And he's been deeply involved in scouting at all of his stops as well. You kind of see how Brooklyn built while he was there. And then the Pelicans these past few years, getting guys like Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. Keith, I'm just curious, do you have any insight on Trajan Langdon? And obviously the Pistons, they just need somebody who can really organize and get this thing going. I guess overall thoughts on this hire and what he brings.
Yeah, I know he's a guy who's extremely well regarded around
Mhm.
the league. People really like him. One of the things you heard commonly about him was he puts in the work. That
Mhm.
that that helps. It also helps. He was a player for a long time. Didn't spend a lot of time in the NBA, but played overseas some. Was obviously a very high level college player. He's known to be a very good communicator with players, which is very helpful in these roles. I think sometimes where the breakdown is if everything from the front office to the players has to be filtered through a coach, you lose some of that connection there. Really, I view it as it's like a stool with four legs. You have ownership, front office, coaches, and players. And if anyone's out of balance, you get a little wobbly. So you want to have them all kind of balanced together so they're all able to get on the same page and those kind of things. And that seems to be something he's very skilled at. As far as what did he drive transactionally? That's always hard when it's not the guy in the top spot. But I'm sure he was a big part of a lot of the decision making there in New Orleans. And they've done quite a bit of stuff in his time there, especially under David Griffin. They really made trades, they draft picks, they made some really gutsy trades. They did a lot of different things. I'm sure he was heavily involved because the number two, often that's where it starts. A lot of times it's the two number twos are getting together and they kind of hammer everything out. And then it goes to the main guys who really kind of fine tune the details, get it to a place where they're good before ownership signs off on it. So I think he's pretty good at it, but we're gonna find out here in presumably the next month, I guess. So as long as everything goes how we're expecting it to, then we'll start to get a real read on what he likes to do.
Guys, I see you asking the draft questions. We'll talk draft with Keith at the end of the episode. I know Keith has dove into the NBA draft and he's going to be able to talk about that and the prospects he likes and some of those things. So we'll dive into that. But while we have Keith here, we wanted to talk about Langdon and the front office and the offseason and the salary cap and all of those things. I think you brought up something that's interesting, Keith, because how much can we actually know about what Langdon likes, doesn't like, is there anything from that history with the Nets, with the Pelicans, where he wasn't the number one guy? Or should we all kind of just be, hey, we're probably all going to learn it as we go this offseason in terms of what free agency goes after, who he drafts and those type of things? I mean, is there anything we can really know in this situation right now?
Yeah, I don't know that there is necessarily. I mean, we'll start to get that picture, and I'm sure when it is finalized and he's really doing the job, we'll start to get more will come out, whether that be from like the big reporters like Woj or Shams or those guys, or the local guys like Omari who start to form that relationship with them. And where the immediate with the draft and stuff, we may get that from the various draft experts who have presumably had a lot of conversations with him and the like as they've been at different scouting events. Because as you guys know, sometimes at these scouting events, there's a lot of downtime. And one thing we know with these guys, they love to talk, right? So it'll be, there's probably all kinds of thoughts. And I'm sure some of the leading draft experts can give us a better feel on what he prefers in a player, like what he's looking for and those kind of things. Because you're probably not going to get a whole lot of that in an introductory press conference. It'll be, we want good players who are good people, who are going to be good in the community and want to be, members of the Detroit Pistons, right? And that's okay, cool. But that tells us absolutely nothing, right? Because I'd almost respect it more if it's like, look, I don't care if the dude's a dirt ball. If he can play and put the ball in the hoop, I'm drafting him, right? Like then be all right. Well, at least we kind of know that part of it. But everybody says the same kind of things there, and it'll be over time we'll start to develop that picture. And then transactionally with the NBA side, we'll start to probably understand that some with what is some of the roster decisions he makes right out of the gate, because presumably he'll be very involved on a couple of the team options, non-guarantees, those kind of things. And then what does he do with what I'm projecting to be a whole bunch of cap space? How does he handle that going into the offseason? And then you always find out, what does he think about the guys who are on the roster, right? Because if some of those guys they're out of here draft week, well, we know how he felt about them probably with that. So you go from almost unknown to, all right, we think we have a pretty good idea very, very quickly, just because that's the necessity of how quick it has to come together in the NBA.
One of the top decisions you mentioned, the roster, pretty much out of the gate. The two top decisions I think everybody's curious about is Troy Weaver and Monty Williams, just to reiterate, it's sort of been the same situation since they started the search, but Trajan will have power to reshape the front office staff as he sees fit, if that involves firing Troy or Monty. And Monty has still around $67 million guaranteed on his contract. I checked in on it last week, and they're prepared to eat that if need be. I guess I know you cover so much, I never know how much you're able to watch individual games or have opinions on individual coaches. But when a GM comes in, you typically see them when they come in and sort of get things going immediately, right? There's some examples of coaches staying, GM staying, but more often than not, it seems like they come in and they sort of do a clean sweep and get their own people in there.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Now, here's the tricky part. We're less than a month from the draft. So I don't know that we're going to see Trajan Langdon come in and clean sweep the front office out, because even if there are people he wants to hire, generally a lot of those contracts, they work July 1st to July 1st, just like players do. So sometimes what happens in those cases is, and I'm completely making this up, but let's say there's somebody in the scouting staff of the Pelicans he really wants to bring over, unless he's bringing him over in a major promotion, which teams don't generally block somebody at that level. He's probably not going to hire him until after things are said and done. So that becomes a little bit of a challenge. That'll be more of a let's do this going into next year's transaction cycle and all that. So I think what you'll probably see happen is come in, all right, here's the work I had done over here in New Orleans. Here's the work y'all did here in Detroit. And now we're going to try to marry these things together a little bit to have a little bit of an understanding. But I would expect there to be some level of changes. And I'm with you. I fully believe everything that you all have dug up and reported on. Hey, if he wants to move on from the coach, he can. But man, that's a difficult conversation to say, hey, want to light $64 million on fire? Yeah. Because I don't know that Monty Williams turns right around and gets a job right away, which would presumably the exit negotiation or the contract's already written, so that if he takes another job, that goes away. Another head coaching job, that is. So he may say, because he clearly wasn't super enthused right out of the gate to take this job in the first place. I think he was looking forward to, hey, I want to take a little time off. I want to do some other stuff. Maybe I'll pop up and do some TV or whatever it is here. And if he does that, you're now paying him a lot of money to sit home for a number of years. So I'm sure it's probably more of a, hey, I believe Coach X over here that I can hire is the guy for us. And that means Monty has to go. That's probably when the situation happens. But we're getting a little late in the game for all that. So my guess is it'll probably be, hey, let's at least give this a year, see what it looks like. Can we work together? Can we start getting things moving in the right direction? Troy Weaver's a different situation because it's just such an odd place to be in for Troy Weaver, too. I get it. People have certain feelings about him, but I think Troy Weaver's, you got to have at least a little sympathy to the fact of that's weird. Now someone else is coming in to do your job over you. And it's like, all right, what is my role here? How much do I have to say? So I'm thinking that's probably let's help with the transition. Maybe he sticks through the draft and beginning part of free agency, but kind of just in name only. And then we may see that kind of quietly. Hey, that may be one where Omari, you dig it up. Hey, heard last week Troy Weaver's now done with the Pistons and has moved on. And because it may be something that happens kind of quietly. I don't know that it'll be a big public thing because I think everybody wants to be reasonable and decent to people in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the value of Troy Weaver for Trajan Langdon because no matter what people think about what Weaver has built here, Weaver is the one that made the final decisions on bringing those guys in. And if I'm Trajan Langdon, I would want to know, well, why did you think Jaden Ivey? Why did you think Jalen Duren? Why did you think Simone Fontecchio, et cetera, et cetera? Whether you agree with it or not, if I was in Langdon's shoes, I would love to be able to pick Troy Weaver's brain over why this stuff all happened, how it happened, and all of that. I want to ask real quick, and then we'll move to the players and the offseason and the cap, and I want to ask some general cap questions. Have they missed the boat on the coaching? You kind of touched on this real quick, but let's say they fired Monty Williams 2 weeks from now, whatever, are there still good candidates out there that just you would be excited about, right? The Lakers coaching search is going to take up one of these guys. Are there still some names, or have the Pistons missed the boat where it's like, no matter what he thinks about Monty, this is probably better for him to stay on, and we'll reevaluate this a year from now when maybe we can get ahead of everybody else.
I don't know that they've missed the boat. I think it's more of a, what kind of coach do you want? Because right now we have the Lakers and the Cavs, and they're kind of swimming in the same-ish pool of candidates where they're two teams that are trying to win, right? They're not rebuilding. They are trying to win right now. So they're looking for certain kinds of coaches. Then you have Washington that is very much more in the same position as Detroit. But I think Washington is taking even a longer range view. They are in year one of just starting this process. We even completed a full year of their teardown. That'll come when we land right around draft time. So I think the Wizards are in a spot where, hey, we can go with a very young, up and coming coach, or even if it's not young, just a coach, first time coach, and go. I think for Detroit, you're in a spot where, what are the goals, right? And that's going to be, for me, if I'm Trajan Langdon, and presumably this conversation's already been had, but would be with ownership, with Tom Gores and crew, what is the goal this year, next year, 3 years, 5 years? Where are we trying to get to? And it can't just be win a title, right? Because that's, sure, that sounds awesome. Let's do that. But it needs to be realistic. Is it this year we want to be this year's version of the Magic? Or we want to be, even if it's not the Magic, a team that takes a more normal, we want to be in contention for the play-in tournament. And then next year, a playoff team, the year after that, went around, and now we're into a different status. If that's where we want to go, okay. Now, if that's the case, I might be looking at more of a Kenny Atkinson, James Borrego, maybe even the best decision when you've done all your analysis, keep Monty Williams. He's done well with veteran teams in the past. So that might be where this is all headed. I think before you can do that, though, you have to get organizational alignment from the top straight through, because I feel like that's almost been a little bit of the missing piece somewhat here. Felt like ownership kind of hired the guys they hired and then, did one of these and walked away. And then it was, wait, where are we going? Not that you don't need Tom Gores and ownership driving down on Trajan Langdon every day, being involved in every conversation, but you do want to have organizational alignment in what your goals are, and that'll help drive your other decisions. So that's a long way to say I don't think they've missed the boat. If they decide, you could still get a Sam Cassell if you wanted. You could probably still get James Borrego. Sounds like he's trying to come back in. I think Kenny Atkinson would be an interesting hire, considering it's going to be almost no matter what a pretty young team that's building up. But a lot of that depends on where are we going.
And sort of building off of that, Trajan's coming into a situation where on paper you're mid-rebuild because Cade's extension eligible this summer. You have Duran and Ivy who will be there next year. And you're sort of in the point in the rebuild where you have to make decisions quickly as far as which guys are really part of this thing and which guys do we need to move on from now and figure out what their value is. And you look at most rebuilds, typically after a few years, you probably have two guys who are worth building around regardless of how many picks you've had. And they've had 8 first rounders in the past 4 years. As far as that coach search, is it like, do you maybe go the Magic route where it's okay, we have guys that we're committed to and we could begin to really compete? Or do you almost look at this like this team won 14 games, like regardless of what has already been built, we have to come in this with a completely fresh perspective, and maybe at that point it's almost more of a rebuild. I guess you look at where the Pistons are, where do you fall as far as where this timeline is or where it should be?
I think the good thing for Trajan Langdon is he's not walking into any bad money on the books where it's like, oh, we're already locked into these 3 contracts and there's not a lot you can do with it. He's now on the flip side, there's no bad money on the books because there's been no long-term decisions made in the past few years. So he has to make those decisions. Like you said on Cade Cunningham, that's a decision that really needs to be made. I'm going to say within the next month-ish. It's hard because if you're not going to offer a guy a max contract, it gets a little wonky and a little weird. If you're going to do it, that'll be a midnight on July 1st. I know free agency opens at 6 p.m. on the 30th, but because that's a rookie scale thing, that's a July 1st at midnight thing. It's just a silly 6-hour difference thing. Doesn't really matter. If you're still up, you're going to see it. And I would presume if they're locked in, which, spoiler alert, I would be with Cade Cunningham. I would give him the 5-year max without question. If you're going to do that, I would get locked into that. And what I would say to them is that would be a midnight on July 1st thing. leak it to whichever reporter you're favorable with, and out it comes. So ideally give it to Omari, right? That's where it should go first. So let's go with this. Now the challenge, I think, then becomes, where are we going with the rest of the guys? That's where we're going to find out very quickly. How does Trajan Langdon feel? We may get a sense of some of that as early as draft week, because if you start seeing moves where it's Jaden Ivey moves or somebody else moves, now all of a sudden we're in a position where it becomes, okay, he's not locked into having to keep every young player on the roster and do all these things. And that can be a very, very different place.
All right, Omari, let's go to a short break. When we come back, I want to get Keith's thoughts and transition a little bit into the offseason. Salary cap of the Pistons, salary caps of other teams, what maybe becomes available to the Pistons because of other teams' salary cap restrictions, and where this salary cap is going, Keith, because that media deal sounds insane. So, Omari, let's start with the Pistons cap sheet when we come back from this.
All right, we are back with segment 2. And Keith, if there's any, I don't know if there's a silver lining to fall in the fifth, but it's that it did clear up a little bit more cap space. So the Pistons went from being the cap space leader to now even having a little bit more on top of that. I think the projections are around 64 billion. I guess one, just from an overall cap situation, that we know that they're wide open, but just how viable is it to be a team with cap space this year, especially when you look at that second apron and teams who are going to maneuver around that?
Yeah, let me start with, I feel like we could have just ran what we ran last year when we talked about the silver linings of falling and opening up more cap space. And maybe even the year before, right?
The difference, Keith, is Victor Wembanyama was in last year's class. Victor Wembanyama is not in this year's class.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're still in range to probably get a guy you may like that number one anyway. So this year, that's a slight 7'4" difference, I guess. Yeah, so here's the thing. I release cap space projections, and the number one reply I get back almost immediately is, who cares? There's no good free agents. You can't sign anybody anyway. And when no, I can't be the coach. I don't have nearly enough knowledge to do that. I could probably assist the front office with cap stuff, but head coach, no, not even close.
Derek Brown drops in the chat. Can Keith Smith be the coach? So I'm here with Derek Brown on this one. But.
No, I would fail miserably at that position. I can tell you that much. The extent of my coaching was a couple years of high school JV, and that's not going to cut it in the NBA. So back to the cap space. Number one thing I get is, who cares? There's no good free agents anyway. That's true, but you don't have to use cap space to sign free agents. As Piston fans are well aware, you can use it to take on contracts, but you can also use it to aid in trading for players I'm going to, for lack of a better term, say actually want on their contract. So if there's a guy that the Pistons are like, man, we really want player X, and one of the best things we have to offer is we don't have to send you back any salary you don't want. We can do that. And we know they've got young players, they've got draft assets, they've got all kinds of stuff they could throw into a trade as well. So I think that's the value of cap space, is it gives you optionality that you would have to be in a very different place, meaning the Pistons can be in any conversation they want to be in with trades or free agents, which is, we'll see where it goes. But that's better than being so capped out and in a miserable spot. For example, the Portland Trailblazers aren't that far off where the Pistons are at, but they're at the luxury tax line going into the summertime. As a terrible team, yeah, I'd rather be in the Pistons spot as a bad team with all this flexibility than Portland kind of saying like, hey, who wants Malcolm Brogdon and Robert Williams and maybe DeAndre Ayton, and in those kind of conversations. And they're probably going to do okay, I think, in trades for those guys, but they don't have a ton of flexibility. They are backed a little bit into a corner. So I'd rather be in Detroit's spot with the ability to jump in any conversation you want to have.
And to add on to that real quick, what are some of the other teams who sort of fit that profile of, like, we have more guys than we need to pay? Like, I know the Hawks are probably a team that will look to offload some salary. Sort of who else fits within that category?
So real quick, Michael asked this. Maybe Keith can touch on which teams might be moving off established players to save money. And I want to tie this all together, Keith, because when you say take on bad contracts, Pistons fans automatically go to Joe Harris, who provided zero value to the Pistons. There's guys that can provide value that are just getting paid more than what they're actually worth, but can still be good players. So maybe you could name a few of those as you go through some of these teams also.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Portland, right? And it would be weird for two bad teams like this to do a deal. But let's say the Pistons were like, Malcolm Brogdon can really help us. And honestly, probably could, right? He'd come in and just be a stable, steady hand at the guard position. And they're like, yeah, we can do his $22 million contract this summer. We'll take that on and give a little bit of salary relief. It's probably not going to be the Dwayne Dedmon, Joe Harris, just dump all your bad money here kind of stuff. I mean, it certainly could be. It could be that, because you could head down that path if they wanted to go that way. So teams you're looking at that are in that kind of situation would be Atlanta. Omari, you're spot on with that one. Way too expensive to be dancing around the tax line. As funny as we said with the Pistons moving up.
I was gonna say, how much did the Hawks jump, Keith? How much?
Yeah, they added $7 million,
and that's important for them, right? That was huge. I mean, did that jump them close to an apron or over an apron?
Not an apron necessarily. A lot of that depends on what they do with guys like Sadiq Bey. Do they re-sign him? Or what happens with someone like Vit Krejci? Are they going to bring him back? And then clearly we know DeJounte Murray, Trae Young, Clint Capella. There's going to be something's going to happen there, I think, within their veteran group. But they're dancing around it now. So they're in a tricky spot from a standpoint of $7 million for them changes things. Now, if it was $7 million to draft Victor Wembanyama, you don't care. You're throwing the biggest party with that you can.
Yeah.
To draft Alex Sarr, I know we both like him as the top guy, Bryce. That's different, right?
Yes.
That's a much more of a shot in the dark kind of situation. So I think what happens for Atlanta is you got to get off some money one way or another, whether that happens in a Trae Young trade, DeJounte Murray trade, a Clint Capella trade, something. And I don't know that I'm not pitching by any means all those guys as options for Detroit, but yeah, if you wanted to get involved on DeJounte Murray, sure, like why not? And that could be a way you go. Now we know the Pelicans were trying to trade for DeJounte Murray, so maybe we do have a little insight. Maybe Trajan Langdon does really like him, and I think on his contract, he'd be a good player, and that's the kind of guy who can help you step forward and then be a part of it when you actually have made the step forward.
Only 27 years old, fits with Cade.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. People get. This is a total aside. People get way too tied up in this timeline stuff of doesn't fit the timeline. Because what happens the first time a team gets kind of good? Well, we got to get them a veteran to help.
They're
get
too
them
young. The Thunder were too young, Keith.
Like, right? Yeah. Like, what are we doing? Like, get the veteran first. Like, and enjoy him all the way up there. Like, I get it. You don't need to go at a. They would do, but PJ Tucker or Russell Westbrook, like that. Yeah, that would be silly. But DeJounte Murray, who's in his mid to late 20s, like, come on, that's fine. Like,
don't you think there's the idea of like the move that leads to the next move also? Like, even if DeJounte and Cade aren't perfect fits, DeJounte's a really good player on a good contract right now. Yeah. And then maybe in 2 or 3 years, when Cade's really ready to contend and the rest of the roster's really, maybe then you take him, combine him to something else, and you get the perfect fit next to Cade.
And Murray's contract is already so good. Like that, like Murray's contract is going to be a joke in a couple of years. Like he's like, it's already a good deal, but he's making like 24, like something like that.
Yeah, it's like 27, I think is the average annual value. But yeah, the point still holds. That's a great contract, especially with where the cap's going to be going here pretty soon. So back to other teams, because that's Atlanta's definitely one of them for sure. I think there's a world where Denver could potentially look to do something where falling short this year. Personal opinion is I would not overreact. I think they just ran into a Minnesota team that was a buzzsaw at the moment. Not a good matchup for them, and they just couldn't get through them. But there are some who suggested maybe they look to move Michael Porter Jr. and then turn Michael Porter Jr.'s flex by getting off that money in full, or turn him into 2 or 3 guys that can flesh out their depth, because clearly that was an issue by the end of that series against the Nuggets. Only Christian Brown was coming off the bench for them. They didn't trust anybody else to play minutes. I would rather see them, hey, let's really invest in the young guys in the regular season, Make sure we give them minutes. You can't yo-yo them in and out of the rotation like Julian Strother was all year long. Let's really stick with them and let's run. So that's another team I think you could keep an eye on, potentially looking to make a move. Golden State is obviously sent all these kind of it's so funny, man. Wes is on it, dude. I assume that's Wes. But
we share the duties, so
okay,
we have them ready to go.
All right, perfect. Yeah, Andrew Wiggins could definitely be a guy that could be in play. The Warriors have made a lot of comments on we're going to get under the luxury tax. I don't know if they'll get all the way under the luxury tax, but I think they're going to be under the aprons. I think they are going to commit to getting off some money. If not Wiggins, let's say Wiggins can't be moved. Could you jump in and steal somebody else, right? Like that. Those are the conversations you're starting to have a little bit there with Golden State. Then
Keith, quick. Big Dog Pistons ask Isaiah Stewart's for Wiggins and a first-round pick. I want to use this. Is Wiggins a neutral value? Is he a complete negative value? What do you think Andrew Wiggins' market is this summer with that contract and where he was as a player, at least this last year, and kind of the uncertainty around all of that?
Yeah, so here's the thing. If you're going to trade for Andrew Wiggins, you're trading for $85 million roughly over the next 3 seasons. It's about 26, 28, and then 30 is about where we're headed with that. You have to have a serious conversation and understand organizationally. It's not anything we need to know, anybody watching this, listening, or anything like that. But the Pistons would need to know what's going on in your personal life that caused you to miss so much time. Because the last thing you can do right now is say, hey, we'll take on that money to have you then play 25 games and be out for 2/3 of a season or whatever. Because I think if this was a 1-year deal, who cares? You're eating a contract for draft assets in return. So that's the difference. Now, I think in the Warriors case, I don't know that Isaiah Stewart fits exactly what they would want. I don't know. I don't hate the idea, and I don't hate the deal construction. I don't know that you're getting a first back, though, in that situation, because I don't know that they'll be that desperate to dump Andrew Wiggins. I personally think how the Warriors are going to handle things is I think they're going to waive Chris Paul, which will knock $30 million off the books. And then I think if Klay Thompson is back, it's going to be roughly for half what he made this year. And that puts them in the position to get under or really close to under the tax line. And definitely under the apron. So that's how I think they'll be. But that's a spot. If it's if it was Detroit sending a pick, maybe, then I don't know that I would do that, though. That feels like kind of weird value on that side. So I think it's a little I think there's just a little mismatch there on that one. So with that one, but the idea is solid of the Warriors and how they're going to be looking. I'll run through the next couple quick.
Sure. Yeah.
I think the Clippers could be in a position where if they are, it's certainly not about money with them. Steve Ballmer can spend whatever it is, but if they want to have increased roster flexibility, you could see maybe a Norman Powell is available, somebody like that, who they're like, hey, we're gonna have our guys, but we're gonna start to move off of some of the money that we've invested in backups. Memphis is a team that's in an uncharted territory with how expensive they're going to be pending whatever happens with Luke Kennard and a couple other decisions. But that could be one where, let's say you really liked John Conchar. Let's say you really have a thing for Zaire Williams. You could probably pick one of those guys off very cheaply. Miami, very expensive team. Milwaukee is in a little bit of a weird spot. The challenge for the Bucks is they can't be trading out of depth. They need to keep their depth because they're an older team. Then we get into the two that I think will be prominent for everybody, Minnesota and Phoenix. So Minnesota is looking at potentially being one of the most expensive teams in the NBA next year. Anthony Edwards qualified for All-NBA. That bumped him to the 30% salary tier from the 25. Karl Anthony Towns has a max extension kicking in there. Jaden McDaniels extension kicks in. You still have Rudy Gobert. They re-signed Mike Conley. And then you've got a whole bunch of other guys that are making like $4 or $5 million. And that fills it out where they're going to be pushing $200 million by the time they fill that roster out. That is them way over the second apron. If they bow out in 4 to Dallas or even 5 or even 6, and they just start looking around saying, all right, we had a run, but it wasn't quite good enough, they could turn and say, all right, we need to make moves. It's not going to be Anthony Edwards. It's not going to be Jaden McDaniels. But could it be Karl Anthony Towns? Sure. With the way he's played, maybe. I don't think it'll be Nickeil Alexander-Walker.
Okay.
I'd ask Silent Green's question here, answer it rather. I think he's too valuable on too small of a contract for the Timberwolves to let him go. That's more of the kind of guys they need to get to rebalance things a little bit there. So that team is going to be in trouble. And then obviously Phoenix. Now Phoenix has said, we're not trading Booker, Beal, or Durant. Those guys are all here. They're all sticking. We're not doing anything. With that, I kind of get it. It's you can't really trade Beal very easily. You shouldn't be even considering trading Devin Booker. That leaves Kevin Durant. You're not going to return enough value that's going to make anybody happy. Keep him. But Yusuf Nurkic, maybe Grayson Allen, probably not, because he just signed an extension that'll keep him out of trade talks, at least till we're in season. So then that becomes guys like Nasir Little, maybe. Okay, but there's just not a lot there. So those are the kind of teams you're looking at. And then there'll be a bunch of like the Lakers who could be too expensive, maybe won't be. They could get involved on teams like that. So it should be ample opportunity for Detroit to take on some money this summer, and not just in the form of terrible contract for a future first-round pick. It should be, all right, this guy just doesn't fit there because the team's trying to shed money, but this guy can actually play.
Yep.
No doubt. I thought of a joke earlier, only because somebody in the comments mentioned we could just tank for Cooper Flag next season. And I'm like, he's not going to be there with the 5th pick. Keith.
Amari, why are you going to do that to people? That is so
you almost
disheartening.
made me spit out the drink of water I took. That was going to be a legit spit take from me.
So Amari said that's like, is this really going to be a good joke, Amari? I don't know. And then you landed it, and I was like, that was really nice. Here's what I'll say. Yeah. I started diving into the 2025 draft. Can we already stop calling this the Cooper Flag draft and not talking about Ace Bailey or anybody? Like, there are other dudes in this 2025 class that are pretty good also.
It's already gone. It's too far gone.
I know.
You're not gonna know what will happen though if Ace Bailey starts playing awesome. I've started calling it the Cooper Flag Ace Bailey draft because I like Ace Bailey a lot.
I love Ace Bailey.
He's going to be really good. So, but I've also seen Cooper Flag play more basketball in high school than anybody since my high school career. And Cooper Flag's going to be really, really good.
Absolutely. That was not a shot at Cooper Flag. It was more of there's like Ace Bailey. There's a few other guys in that class. And I'm like, I think this could be a 3-4 player draft and not just Cooper Flag and nobody else in that tier. So
I think it's also going to look better after this year's draft is not quite as star heavy with like players playing in the US that are American born and all that stuff. I think that's going to help as well. People are going to be watching Cooper Flag. They're going to be watching Ace Bailey. They're going to see those guys play a lot versus it's funny because people still say versus grainy YouTube footage. It's not that way anymore. I can in 2 seconds dial up Alex Sarr film. Then it's awesome. It's as good as anything we're going to get anywhere else, but it's still the average fan's not watching that on a Saturday afternoon. It's not on their TV Saturday afternoon on CBS or ESPN or whatever.
No doubt. Keith, real quickly before we get to segment 3, can we touch on Simone Fontecchio? Yeah. He's a restricted free agent and probably outside of Cade, probably the only other guy who's a real priority to re-sign this offseason. Maybe Quentin Grimes is in there, but just how do you see that playing out? What are the mechanisms they have to sign him? And just sort of how would you project his value and the market around him?
Yeah, the good news is the Pistons have early bird rights on him, if I remember correctly. So they're not in a position where he's not going to get paid, I don't think, more than what they could give him with his early bird rights. Like that's like roughly $17 million in starting salary. You start getting above that, then I'm starting to feel very uncertain about that kind of contract. But if it's anything around even the mid-level exception, which is about $13 million, that's probably fine. Now, here's the challenge is restricted free agent. Unless there's a team with cap space that is really made Fontecchio their priority, that helps the Pistons, right? Because restricted free agents, the process just sucks for them. They get squeezed unless they are really, 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 really good players. guys like that probably shouldn't even have gotten a restricted free agency. It's those guys are always later to go off the board. Like I almost look at it similar to what happened with Grant Williams a year ago, where similar-ish players in that they're forwards who can shoot the ball. Grant's a little bit bigger. Fontecchio is a little bit better a ball handler and those kind of things. But I think there is a position with Fontecchio where it could be maybe there's a team that says, hey, we want to do the full mid-level. I don't think that's enough for Detroit to blink, though. I think he was a targeted acquisition. Now,
and the mid level is around 13, right? So you're looking at
right around 13,
like a 3-year, 40-something million deal. That would be
in that range, a little bit more than that. But
yeah,
I think unless you're in a spot where Trajan Langdon's like, I think he stinks, and I don't want any part of him here. I didn't trade for him, which I don't think is going to be the case. I think you're looking at the Pistons getting him back, and probably on a more friendly contract than even a mid-level deal. You're probably talking about him maxing out around maybe 8 to 10 million with that. And that's great because that doesn't even eat into your cap space. If you sign him to something like that, you just hold it. You sit on that low cap hold, use up your cap space, and then sign him last after your cap space is used up, or I shouldn't say last, but after cap space is gone, because room exception could come after. But you're at that point, you're in the exceptions and signings.
So that's what I was going to ask. And I know, Omari, before we go to break, we need to get the injury update on Fontecchio. But what is the order of operations? I've listened to the front office show enough to know orders of operation matter. Go back to math class and everybody. What is the order of is there a way that because he's a restricted free agent, it can screw it up? Like, is there a path where he's going to end up getting signed first and that eats into the cap space as opposed to last where it doesn't? Like, what are the ways this could play out in terms of that?
Yeah. So order of operations is huge. So what happens in the process of this is we're all going to get a whole flood of tweets at 6:00 on June 30th of player X has agreed to Y, contract Y with team Z. And what's going to happen is everybody's going to immediately start running off and plugging those in and saying team has now no cap space left or whatever. Let's say the Pistons come right out and say, let's say it's one of the early tweets is Pistons and Fontecchio agree to $8 million a year contract. I'm just making it up. What will functionally happen is the Pistons will use $64 million in cap space. That's my projection, so I'm going to run with it. Use that up. Then after they've used that up, then they come back because they still had Fontecchio's cap hold, which is just a placeholder on the books. Then they'll sign him after they've used the cap space. That'll take them up and over the cap. Then the room exception, they could do the room exception first. It doesn't matter once you've used your cap space. You can kind of lay out the transactions almost whatever direction you want. So that's what they'll do. Now, where it could get screwed up is, let's say Orlando or Philly are like, man, we love Fontecchio, and we're parachuting in here with a $17 million a year contract. Then what happens is the Pistons have 24 hours to match it once that's signed. And that's where it could screw things up.
It goes on the books immediately, right?
Yeah. So what happens is that offer sits on the books until they decide to match or not match. And if they match, it's immediately on the books because you've now matched a signed contract offer and entered in a contract. That's the only way it gets messed up. I don't think any of the cap space teams or even a team with the full mid-level is going to come in and try to mess around with Detroit. And I think what would happen is, let's say that is a situation where it's like, hey, we're not going to match this. We're not going to keep you. What you do is you work it out with that other team to say, hey, let's turn this into, rather than an offer sheet, let's turn this into a sign and trade so we can still maximize our cap space. Then we'll sign and trade the guy to you, and we'll toss in a second round pick or whatever the case needs to be to incent that other team into doing that.
Okay. No, that's what I wanted, because I knew the order of operations was important there, and I was just wondering if there's a way he actually ate into the cap space as opposed to after it. So, and then Omari, I know you have an update on some offseason injury news with Tech.
Yeah, just quickly, he missed the last 15 games last season with the toe injury. He had surgery on that in the last few days, and he's expected to make a full recovery and be healthy until training camp. So for those who are curious about Fontecchio's status, that's where it's at. And I expect it to be a serious deal. We're going to go to segment 3. And in segment 3, we'll answer some of your questions and also talk a little bit more about free agency and who's available at the draft. All right, we're back with segment 3. Keith, just to open, and I'm not sure how much you can really project this until you actually get into it and see where the valuations are. The Pistons obviously owe a future first-round pick to the New York Knicks because of the Isaiah Stewart deal. They have cap space, of course. They can absorb salary. How do you, in a league where you have teams like the Thunder and others who are just sitting on draft picks, do you see that as weakening the Pistons in the market when it comes to getting maybe the higher tier guys who are being dumped? Or how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I think they're in a good. This is a weird summer for cap space teams because a couple of the highest projected cap space teams are also really good. So you have
like
Philly. Yep, Philly should be really good. Orlando's pretty good. Oklahoma City's really good. Those are 3 of the top 4 cap space teams. And Utah's in a little bit of a weird spot where Utah has. It's almost gotten weird to me to the point of how much they're reminding everybody at every turn, we're going big game hunting. We're going to try to get a star. We're doing whatever it is. It's like Justin Zanuck just got back to work after the kidney procedure. And like, he's immediately like, we're going big game hunting this summer. And it's like, man, is that all you thought about their recovery? Like we're right here on that line. So I would say they're in a weird spot too. So of the teams with cap space this summer, it's a little odd that Detroit's kind of the only one that's bad. Normally, teams with cap space are bad teams, and it's just and even San Antonio, I would say, is in a weirder spot than the Pistons because they're bad, but they have Wembanyama, so you're almost operating in a weird spot. So that allows the Pistons, if they wanted to play the game, and I know everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, great, this again," but eat contracts for draft picks, they're better positioned to do it than anybody else because nobody else is really sitting on cap space to be able to do that. And their teams certainly are not going to put up with that, right? Oklahoma City Thunder fans, if they ate a contract for a draft pick this summer, they might riot. They might try to tear the building down. Like they're going to lose their minds. So
they don't need a 25th draft pick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The 25th draft pick that's probably going to be the 25th pick in the draft, right? Or something like that. So that's where I think Detroit is set up pretty well. Again, that flexibility of we can play this a lot of different ways. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but that's where you're going to have that organizational alignment. What are we playing for? Are we trying to be good right now? Are we trying to be in a position where, hey, we're going to, I know it's maybe not what everybody wants to hear, but we've got another year rebuilding ahead of us. If that's the case, you could do those kind of things. So I think they are really well positioned to do that. But I think more importantly, it is let's try to get some guys who can play because there's going to be guys who can actually play available this year. And shouldn't just be, let's just eat a whole bunch of contracts. I think it'll be a spot where we can actually get some good players and really try to move this thing forward.
All right, we got quite a few questions in the queue, and we don't want to. Your time is very precious, Keith. So we'll start getting to those, Omari, and we'll just go through them as fast as we can, and we'll try to get to some NBA draft stuff. Also, I kind of like this question from Keith Battle. Are there any players on the current Pistons that other teams would actually want? Like, do you think there's value out there for? How do teams, do you think, view Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren? I'm not saying the Pistons should be considering trading those guys, but maybe there is a consolidation of young talent or an Isaiah Stewart, something like that. Outside of Cade Cunningham, are there guys on this team that you think would be attractive to other NBA teams?
Yeah, at all various levels, right? That's the benefit of they're all either still on their rookie deals or they are on reasonable deals. Even Isaiah Stewart, who by the time like we kind of flip to the offseason is likely to be the biggest contract on the roster. He is somebody teams would say 15 million for what he should be as a solid backup 5. That's fine, right? Many teams are going to be okay with that kind of thing. I know teams that love Jaden Ivey. I have had at least 4 or 5 teams be like, he was criminally misused last year. And it's partially because I've also written and tweeted about that. So they're going to say that because they know like they're in agreement with me on that. But it is a spot where I know there's a lot of teams that are like, plug this guy in on a really good team. And he could be a Malik Monk type of 6th man where he's filling up the scoring. Jalen Duren's a guy that I know. I don't know teams that don't like him, especially on his rookie deal. Now, I think that one could flip very quickly, where if that becomes an immediate max contract and an extension, then that might get a little weird for some teams. But for now, teams are very high on guys like that. So Thompson, another one. Everybody loves that guy. Like he would be a very easily plug and play on a lot of these teams. It's what happens at this time of year too is everybody starts evaluating them. Could you put them on the Celtics and they play a role in these big games? Could one of these guys played on the Pacers and lifted them into more competitive games-wise series against Boston? Could they play for Dallas? Could they play for Minnesota? That starts to be a lot of the conversation is, could these guys get dropped in when these teams talk about them? Because if you're trading for a guy like that, it's probably one of two things. Either you think it's an Ivy situation and the Pistons don't know what they have potentially. I think that swung as the year went along a little bit. Or it's a situation of, we're trying to be very good and we think this guy can pop right in and help us. So that's where I think we're definitely in a situation where we could get some value out of some of these guys. I think the bigger thing is the Pistons kind of traded the tradable guys already. And I wouldn't, unless somebody blows me away with an offer, I'm keeping all these kids. I'm not doing anything drastic this summer with any of these guys.
No doubt. We have a question here from Muhammad. What realistic target do you think would fit K like a glove? And I guess with that, you're probably looking at guys almost like Fontecchio, right? Like just getting more shooting around him.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of it, right? Is give him shooting, because I think less so last year, which sounds weird because the team was worse. But in the prior, I know the year before it was his season was a mess. But I'm going back to like his rookie year. I felt like he lost faith in guys. There were too many times where he broke down a defense, made the right read, jumper got clanged off the front of the rim, jumper got cracked off the backboard. I feel like then what happens is, all right, I got to do it myself. That leads to, I'll take this crappy mid-range pull-up rather than make the right passing read. I thought really started year 2 for him where he was making the right kind of moves, making the right decisions. Then I think it really flipped into this year. I thought he made the right decision more often than not as far as being a playmaker. Now, what's also nice with him is you can really go into the season saying, hey, you are functionally, defensively, are 1, 2, or 3. We're going to play you at any one of those positions. I very much believe positions now are defined more by defensive role than they are offensive, or defined by what you do defensively. Offensive things, I think, are more roles than they are positions per se. So I think, getting more shooting around him, ideally 3-and-D guys, right? Let's improve the defense too. So I saw somebody pop up, Najee Marshall. Yeah, I definitely would be on a guy like that. The good news is this is a draft or free agent class. You can actually get guys like that, which I think is going to be valuable. Like I think a guy like Gary Harris could be somebody you could get without breaking the bank. That could really help. I think Gary Trent Jr. is another guy you could bring in that could help. Again, you're just trying to get guys in there that without breaking the bank. If you wanted to get a more stable point guard in there and transition Cade a little more into playing with another ball handler, a guy like Tyus Jones could come in and be a good addition. And then if you want to go a little further down, Caleb Martin, Haywood Highsmith, Royce O'Neal. These are all guys that you could get. Torrey Craig is another guy I really kind of like, where you could get all these guys, and none of these guys are going to be, you're not throwing the parade for signing these guys, but these are the types of signings when we look back and it's February and it's like, hey, the Pistons are still kind of hanging around the play-in tournament race. It's probably going to be because of guys like that came in and filled a role right away with that. And that's the nice thing about Cade Cunningham. You don't have to, because he's so flexible where you could play him, you could draft all kinds of guys. If he was a Scoot Henderson type point guard, where he's a true point guard, you have to be careful you don't draft somebody who's over top of him or sign someone who's over top of him, where Cade is that gives you that value because of his flexibility.
We had a question earlier and then I lost it, but what do you think like Isaiah Hartenstein versus Nick Claxton's suitors are going to be this summer, whether it's the Pistons. I know both of those guys come up a lot in Pistons conversations. What kind of contracts do you think those two guys have played themselves into?
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if either guy landed around 20 million a year. I think they could for sure get into that range. And it's funny, people still have this like block with 20 million, but 20 million's not, it's 1/7 of the salary cap this year. When we get into the cap growth, we're talking, by the time we're done, a $20 million contract is going to be the mid-level. So we're not talking a contract that's massive. So I think that's part one, right? You could definitely get into you could see those guys getting contracts like that. I think Hartenstein's probably more likely to just stay in New York. I think he's found a home there. Players do value. This team believed in me enough to sign me a couple years ago. I don't need to break the bank for them when I'm going to get more money than I've ever seen anyway. And he may give up on a little bit of money to stay.
Is he going to do the Bobby Portis thing, Keith?
He could. Yeah, that's definitely an option where he resigns and then plays out another year and then is a free agent again. Yeah, we could see something
with the
like
full
that.
bird. Is that right? Because right now he has the early, and then he could go one more year would get him the full.
He could do a 1 year, or he could do, if he resigns using it, he could do a 1 year for similar money to what he makes now, or he could do a early bird, which would have to be 2 years, and then an option and come out of it. Or he may just say, hey, I don't want to play games. Just give me 17 million right now. And we'll call it good and off we'll go. Like that could definitely be a thing. And then I think Claxton, there's going to be a lot of what's going to come down to that is one, how much do the Nets value him? Where are the Nets going as a team? I think that's a weird situation with a lot of different possibilities there. And that may be, if you parachuted in and said 25 million a year, the Nets may be like, we're out. We don't even want to touch that. I'm going to go in that direction. So those guys are definitely, I think, going to get paid. I just think Hartenstein's a little less gettable because I think there's a sense of he may give the Knicks a little bit of a discount to just stay there because that has been such a great spot for him.
Keith, we're going to close out by touching on the draft. We have a question from Aruna. How likely are the Pistons to trade out of this draft? The intel I've gotten is that they're pretty likely, just given the spot and also where they are as a team. We could probably tweak this from more of a value standpoint. Do you see the value of the 5th pick being tradable, or do you have guys at that 5 spot that you think are worth taking if you're the Pistons or just going that route?
Yeah, I think what kind of stinks for the Pistons in that position is you don't have teams that are still in the same-ish range where teams have multiple picks that you could like let's say you had a team that had 10 and 12. You could probably say, all right, that makes sense. Like we'll take 10 and 12 for 5 or something like that and just try to flush it out. But I think the other challenge is who's trying to come up. Like that's going to be my thing. That would have to be a very targeted player that a team very highly believes in is coming up to get that guy. So I think that's a little bit of the challenge there. This doesn't really feel like that kind of draft where teams are going to be doing that. But that said, sometimes when the draft is a lot more flat, guys slip that teams love, and then that could be where it opens up. Let's say for some reason Alex Sarr or Zachary Risache is sitting there at 5. I could see a world where a team says, no, we got to get him. Let's get up there to get to that 5th pick, and we'll give Detroit some value here to go make that happen.
And just a little spoiler, Omari did trade the number 5 pick in an upcoming mock draft that will be out on the Basketball Bulletin in a couple days. We've been going at this for like 10 days, guys. And so we're finishing it up here slowly but surely. And I'm not going to spoil who we traded it to and what happened there. But Keith, like you text me today with one of your picks and like I couldn't, or maybe it's the other day, like couldn't let this person slide anymore. So in our mocks, that type of stuff happens. I want to ask you about some Pistons specific players, and then we'll let you go, Keith. Pistons talk, and I think he was talking about maybe the one that would make sense would be trading back to 7 and 14 with the Blazers if the Blazers wanted to move up to 5 for somebody. But he brings up Cody Williams, Tinjon Saloon. We don't have to talk about Tinjon Saloon. Wes does that enough on our podcast. That's his guy. But Cody Williams, Zachary Risache, Dalton Connect, give us your Pistons wish list if you were Trajan Langdon or advising him let's throw Alex Sarr out and say he goes number 1. I think everybody else is somewhat possible. What do you think, Keith? You've scouted these guys. You're doing the work.
Yeah, I like Reese Shea. I'm trying not to get swayed by recency. He played really well in some big games down the stretch, and that means a lot to me. This is the equivalent to me of the guy who has the big NCAA tournament run. You have to be really careful because you have to use your full body of work and your full scout on this. And some of that I'm swayed a little more because I'm spending more time on this now than I did earlier in the year. But I like the kid. I like Cody Williams. Probably, I think I like him more than you do.
Yes.
He's somebody I think he's really good. I think he got caught in super weird situations in Colorado where it felt like it was kind of his team. Then he had some injuries. Then it kind of became KJ Simpson's team to run with the ball. Then he had more injuries. And then by the time we were into the conference tournament and the NCAA tournament, he's playing with a mask. He's limping around on a not great ankle, and he didn't look very good. But if we go again, body of work, Cody Williams shot the ball better than I thought he was going to. I thought he shows a lot athletically. I don't know that he's quite as strong or athletic as his brother is, but I think there's like a smidgen under that, which is pretty good because Jalen Williams is a really good athlete. I also think Jalen Williams saw the game better, but he also had the ball in his hands a lot more for Santa Clara than Santa Clara, I think it was.
Santa Clara.
I tend to get Santa Clara and Pepperdine guys confused because it's like
fair.
California schools, and then I'm like, I don't know, they play in the same league.
Santa Clara is the one that's putting all the dudes in the NBA. That's what they would tell you the difference, because that's where pods came from as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And I knew Pajemski was there. So, but yeah, with Cody Williams, I like him quite a bit. Other players that I personally have in that range on my board, I think Nikola Topic could now be there. I think there's a world where we're going to see him potentially slide a little bit, depending on how worried teams are about this knee stuff.
Sure.
It's not the knee injury. It's the second knee injury that I think has some teams concerned there. I would be all right if he's still on the board. Reed Shepherd, I think could be a really
I love Reed Shepherd.
Yeah, man, he's tough. He's really tough. He gets after it there. Now, if you trade back, sure, then that opens it up even more. Now you're talking, instead of 7-8 players that could be arranged, now you're talking maybe 20 players. Yeah. If you trade back even just a few picks. And I know we probably don't want to get into all that. I would love to if we had unlimited time, but I don't know that that's what we want to do. But yeah, there's a lot of guys. I would also, my number 2 guy I have Alex Sarr number 1 on my personal board. My number 2 guy, I like Donovan Clingan.
Also love him.
I think there's a world where he could be really good. I think Donovan Clingan, by like year 5 or 6, is going to shoot 3-pointers. I think he's going to have a Brook Lopez like career, but the second half of Brook Lopez's career, where ultimate rim protector. I think he's a pretty good rebounder. I think he moves his feet a lot better than people give him credit for. Yep. I think people see big white kid and they think, all right, well, he's probably stiff. He can't really move. He can move. Like, he can cover some ground. And I don't know, man. I'm just a huge fan of his timing, his shot blocking, and I think he's going to shoot. So that puts him just in a position where I'm right there with him behind Sarr. And I know that's a little higher than a lot of people have him, but it feels like that's getting more in range now with that. So yeah, if he was on the board, I'd be all over him too.
The thing with him is I wouldn't be surprised if they go 1-2. I mean, if Sarr goes 1 to the Hawks,
there's a chance.
I would not be shocked if the Wizards, who need a big man, took Clingan. I've been writing about these over on my Substack, and Clingan I've warmed up to the idea, because the other thing with Clingan is I don't think he's going to come in and play 30 minutes a night. Even at UConn, his minutes were a little bit lower. Yeah. So the first couple of years of his career, 20 to 24 minutes is probably what he needs to do. Kind of like what we see in Dallas with Derek Lively II right now, in terms of limiting his minutes, and another good big there also. So
yeah, and I think in Washington's case, I mean, if I was Washington, I think Sarr goes first. That's been my opinion now for a solid month or more. I would go, if Clingan is on the board, I would take him, and I don't even know that I'd really listen to trade offers or anything, because they're probably not going to be good enough. And that you have Rashawn Holmes, maybe you play him a little bit. You have Marvin Bagley, you play him. Give Clingan 24, 25 minutes a night as a rookie. Let him build into the role, play the other guy behind him or even in front of him if you need to start the year. Let him grow into the role because you can afford to be patient. You're not trying to win. Just be patient with him, and he's going to be big time. So yeah, I'm really excited about him.
Keith, I think we'll probably cut it off there. We're a little past time, but always such a pleasure to have you on, especially now with the Pistons probably being one of the more interesting teams of this offseason, just with all the different ways they can go. Please tell our listeners where they can find you.
Find all my written work over at Spot Track. I'm in the middle of offseason preview series there where we're about 17 teams deep now, maybe 18. I can't remember. We go in order of elimination. So anybody who's a lottery team is up. Pistons are obviously up there. So if anybody wants to read that, I've also got free agent previews coming out. We do them by position, traditional positions, just because that's easiest. That's what most people understand. Point guards and shooting guards are posted. There are 217 potential free agents. That is inclusive of all of the two-way players. I ranked all 217 of them within their position buckets and wrote something about all of them. I buried myself in G League film trying to understand more about the two-way guys, trying to look for two-way guys that could pop and maybe be NBA rotation guys. Spoiler, there's not very many this class around. There's a couple, but there's some guys I like. One of whom that I actually like is Jared Roden, who I don't understand why I didn't get more of a chance in Detroit. I really liked him quite a bit. But yeah, it's so that's all coming out. Bryce mentioned it earlier, NBA front office show with Trevor Lane and I. We have a blast on that show. We new episodes come up every day, Monday through Friday. Every Friday is a live show. What we call it Front Office Friday. It's the fan.
No. Do it, Keith. If you're
I can't do it. I have to save it for the show.
Okay. I almost did it, but then I felt bad. I know. You guys got to go check it out, what we're talking about. Just tune into the start.
Beginning of every show.
It's amazing.
It starts because I get fired up. I enjoy talking basketball with my buddy. So Trevor's one of my best friends. For those who don't know, Trevor's a Lakers guy. I'm a Celtics guy. Yeah. So there's a lot of interplay with that there too. But we have a lot of fun with it. We have a blast. Those Friday shows are phenomenal there for the fans to really it's your show to ask questions and get into that. And sometimes we go completely off the rails and Fridays get nuts. We will also be live for the NBA draft. Probably for the first round. We'll see on the second round, but definitely for the first round. And then we will also be live each night. Starting on the 30th, probably somewhere around 1-2 a.m. Because what we do is we go live when free agency starts to slow down a little bit for the day, and we recap everything throughout the course of what's happened that day in the NBA with free agency. So you can find all that. And then the basketball bulletin, which right now Bryce is carrying with all of his scouting notes and everything for us. It's just this time of year is hard for me to get a lot of words up there, but Trevor's had some stuff going up there as well. We have a good time over there too. So a lot of stuff going on. This is my favorite time of year, and not only just because the Celtics are back in the finals, but that certainly helps. And I appreciate Omari wearing the green shirt today too.
Yeah, completely coincidental, but we'll make it a retroactive honor. I'm from Detroit and I cover the Pistons. I can't even joke and act like I'm signing with the Celtics. Like they will kick me off the pot.
So Keith,
I don't know. Apparently, conferences are now a thing, right? It's turned into college sports. Or it was like SEC. Like we have to root for the conference, which is the ridiculous.
Trevor's leading the charge. Like, listen, yeah. I thought the banter back and forth on the show was a little bit of a stick. Trevor has texted me things where I'm like, dang, you really hate the Celtics.
He does. Yeah.
You really want them to lose.
Oh yeah. He's been on his favorite team is the Lakers. His second favorite team is whoever's playing Boston. So he has been, since the Celtics have kind of rolled through, which easy path, fully get it. Nothing they did except to earn it by being the 1 seed. But yeah, Trevor has been 100%. He's like, somebody's going to beat these guys. He does not want them getting that 18th title. So I assume by game 1 of the finals, he's going to be wearing Mavericks gear and all out and going crazy for Dallas. But yeah, I obviously grew up in Boston, so I'm a Celtics kid, and forever will be, and that's my team. But yeah, I'm fired up. But yeah, man, but yeah, it's now turned into this weird conference alignment thing. Yeah. We're not turning the NBA into stupid college football. Let's cheer for, even though we hate this school and we would burn the entire campus to the ground and salt the earth underneath it. but we'll root for them because it's our conference in a bowl game. That's nonsense.
Yeah.
That is not a thing, and we're not doing that in the
NBA. Plant your flag.
Yeah, fair enough. Also, Keith, I don't think you actually have time to watch the MCU. I was thinking about you went through all 217 guys. I don't like it's like how the inside the NBA guys called out Cat for the 1500 jumpers. I don't think you actually watched the MCU. I don't think you have time for that.
No, yeah, funny thing is, I've been very thankful for this slowdown.
Yeah.
Within Marvel right now, because I would not be near it because I do devote a good amount of time to that. But yeah, I love it. I love it, man. Those Marvel movies are my favorite thing in the world. There is a good chance if there's not a basketball game on my TV, there's a Marvel movie playing at some point. And every summer, it's getting very hard because there's so many movies and TV shows. Yeah. I used to every summer. My daughter's gotten into it now too. We would do a full rewatch. Now that's an investment of time that I don't know that we can make. But yeah, man, and I'll be there day one. Deadpool, I can't wait. It slots right between Summer League and the Olympics, so I can't wait. I'm all fired up for that.
And that's also the only MCU movie this year, which makes it easier too instead of the usual 4.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I would not have had time, and I can be honest. I probably wouldn't have watched as much G-League film if there was more Marvel stuff coming out.
Hey, well, the MCU, we can thank for that, right?
There it is.
Hey, Keith, always such a pleasure to have you on, and I'll go ahead and close this up. Big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and our executive producer, Kirkland Crawford. And big thanks to Wes as always, and we will talk to you all next week.